Bob, it's great to see you.
Jim,
okay, so
see
Professor,
you.
for all your students out
Your
there,
Highness.
yeah, exactly. We have 60 seconds, not 60 minutes. What's the worst of what are the worst things that are broken about our American capitalism right now?
Big money in politics. That's number one. Secondly, people getting so cynical about the entire system, they are dropping out. They say they don't want to get involved. That's a huge problem.
But they get it. I mean, one of the only, at least heartening things to me, and I think you're a little bit more optimistic about the future than I, is virtually every poll you see it. You wrote a piece in the Globe last week that I saw where you go back to the 60s, and did people think government was owned by special interests? Virtually nobody. Now it's up to 70%. Almost everything you say in your book, even if they don't know all the details, the public gets, don't they?
They're getting it. And I think that's why you see this upsurge of anti-establishment feeling, anger, sometimes channeled against, you know, against scapegoats. I mean, you've got authoritarian populism running rampant.
You mean like immigrants you're talking about? Is that
against immigrants, but also against Muslims, against the poor. Some of it's racist, some of it's outright racist. You've got a lot of scapegoating going on, and I don't want to sound too partisan, but most of it is coming from Republicans. And then you also have a kind of reform populism, and I think Bernie Sanders is probably the most obvious exponent of it. This anti-establishment surge, Jim, is directly related to everything I talk about in this book.
Long before there was a Donald Trump candidate, I should say.
Long before there were Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. But I tried to explain the inevitable result of what happens when you've got so much income, so much wealth, and so much political power concentrated at the top.
When you say inevitable outcome, did you read Thomas Frank's book, what, 10, 15 years ago, What's the Matter with Kansas? And his thesis is, with which I sadly totally agree, is working class people time and again will understand these issues and then vote against their own economic self-interest. That is history, at least recent history, isn't it?
Maybe recent history, but the long-term history, look at the 1830s, look at the 1890s leading up to the Progressive Era, 1901, 1916. Look at the 1930s, the New Deal. Look at the Great Society. You know, every 40 years in this country, give or take a decade, there is a reformist movement that says, look, capitalism has got to work for the majority, for most of us, or we've got to reform it.
Can you bring yourself to allow the words to cross your lips saying that actually Donald Trump gets this? I'm not saying he's got the right solution. Well, he actually does have some right solutions. He does understand this whole realignment that you talk about now?
I don't know if he intellectually understands it, but Donald Trump gets the fact that there is this anti-establishment surge. The problem is that, at least to me, he represents the authoritarian sort of strong man, forget democracy, just follow me, don't ask me any questions, don't worry about the details, I'm strong enough, big enough, smart enough, powerful enough, and I'll do it. You know, this is the Berlusconi, the Mussolini. I don't want to just pick on Italians. I mean, this is you know, this is a tradition that really we've seen Father Coughlin in the 1930s. It is not just foreign, and it's dangerous.
But he is giving voice to a lot of the things you're talking about. Bernie Sanders on one side of the ledger, and Donald Trump on the other side.
I think again, Bernie Sanders represents a progressive, the same progressive forces we saw in right after the Gilded Age of the 1890s, the first Gilded Age. We're now in the second Gilded Age.
You know, when you read this book, you get the sense that if you hear the term free market misused again, your head's going to pop off your shoulders. Tell us, I mean, that's the response to almost everything when someone like you says there are solutions and government's got to be at the core of this. And the response is, of course, no, no, no. The American people love the free market. That's what drives the best of our economy. Yeah. What do you say to those people?
Well, we've set up this false dichotomy, this false debate between the free market and government, when in fact you can't have a free market without government, because there's no free market in nature. I mean, it's you know, out there it's just a jungle, survival of the fittest, the biggest and strongest wins. But you have a civilization based on rules. What's property? What's contract? What's fraud? What is monopoly? How much market power is permissible? These decisions are the essence of a market, and they are made by whom? By legislators, judges, administrative agencies, and they are changed over and over and over again. The question is not market or government. The question is the system as designed the political economic system working for most people, or is it working for a little elite at the top who's calling the shots?
I will state what I think is the truism. I'm sure you agree, because that's how your book is going to be popular. People on the far right and people on the far left can agree with most of what you say here. But then you get to the solutions. I think most of us would agree, 90% of the American people would agree on what the problem is, what's broken, what's rigged, all those sort of things. Give me a solution or two that passes the laugh test. Not if you were the czar of fixing capitalism, but in a democracy like this, where there's this kind of polarization. Give me one or two things that are needed to be done and can be done.
I will give you the only solution.
What's that?
And that is that the left and the right come together around countervailing power. And I say countervailing power, this is what Ken Galbraith, Professor John Ken Galbraith, who I dedicate the book to, was talking about the 1950s, what worked then, but we've lost it now. This is a balance mechanism in our politics and our economics that allows the people to have a voice. Trade unions were one of those countervailing powers, cooperatives, farm cooperatives, industrial cooperatives. We also had local banks and regional banks. We had a system that allowed people to be more confident that the big power at the top was being balanced by power that was more local, power that was coming from where most people actually lived.
Okay, let's end with this. You actually, how long have you known Hillary Clinton?
I'm sorry,
How long have you known?
She was 19.
19?
Yes.
Did you date her?
I did once.
Okay, no, you did.
But we don't need to get into that.
Fine, we weren't going to go into it.
It was this way before she met Bill Clinton.
Okay, fine. And you worked for her husband. She's the leader on the Democratic side. You told us how you feel about the leader on the Republican side. Does she get it? The conventional wisdom, too close to big business. She mouths all the right things, but she doesn't feel it. She doesn't get it. She doesn't get the Reich prescription.
Remember, she starts her campaign this time around. One of the first things she said in her announcement that she was running was that the deck is stacked against average working people in favor of those at the top. Now that's quite a statement for an establishment candidate, if that's what you characterize her. So I think she gets it, but I think that most people so far, if you believe the polls, think that she is too close to those power centers.
Do you?
I think that she is. Let's put it this way. If I were her, I would not take any money from any Wall Street types, any big businesses, any big executives. I would do what Bernie Sanders is doing, just insulate myself. I mean, the trouble is every time you have a big fundraiser where you get people to say, oh yeah, I'll write a check, you run afoul of what you're saying. There's a dissonance between what you're saying about power in America, what you want people to believe, and the money you're taking. And I think people notice that. Bernie Sanders, the big attraction is that Bernie Sanders is not only speaking truth to power, but his affect, the way he does it, Jim. He sounds, and he is, I believe, absolutely authentic. And people are responding to that. You know, I don't like Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is, you know, a kind of a narcissist beyond narcissism. You know, he's a kind of a, I don't even have the words for it, but he's authentic. He's an authentic, cockeyed narcissist. And I think there's something about authenticity that is actually attractive in a time when so many people are so angry and so powerless and so fed up and working hard and getting nowhere. And they see somebody who is authentic, you know, even if they're a jerk, and they say, well, you know, that's better than what we have.
We miss you in Massachusetts. Bob Reich, great book. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you.